Evangelion is my favorite mecha anime series of all time, and possibly even my favorite anime series of all time. I also really like the rebuild of Evangelion films, which I know a lot of people don't. There is one part of this franchise though that I had never seen up until about a week ago, and that is the End of Evangelion, the film that replaces the final two episodes of the original series to essentially create a different and more high production ending for the story. So today I want to talk about my first experience watching it, what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and again, just my overall thoughts on this thing that exists out in the world. Before I dive into it though, I want to hear from you guys, so head on down to the comments section below. If you've seen the End of Evangelion before, which I'm sure many of you have, then let me know your thoughts on it again down in the comment section below. If you remember your first experience of watching it, what was your reaction like to it? How has it kind of held up for you years later, maybe upon different rewatches? What are the things that you've kind of caught on to, and maybe begun to appreciate more about the film? I think it's fair to say with a film like this, it is so difficult to go in with a completely open mind and no expectations of what to expect from it. Because this film is talked about a lot. Like, even still, almost 30 years later, I mean, what, 28 years later since it came out, this film is still talked about, it is still discussed, it is still dissected. You see imagery from this film everywhere. So I went into it expecting something very weird, very strange, and that is kind of what I got. But at the same time, I don't think it's quite as weird as people make it out to be, and that might be because I've watched the original series, I've watched the rebuild films. Now, there's definitely stuff in this film that is weirder than them, but I think if you watch those things, then they kind of prepare you for what goes down in this film. Starting off with the positives though, it goes without saying that the animation in this film is phenomenal. I mean, the animation in Evangelion is generally great anyway. It's got some fantastic imagery, stuff that really sticks in your mind and just has become iconic. And I think this film was really at the forefront of that. When I think of shots from Evangelion, some of the more iconic ones definitely come from this film. You've got giant like Lilith Ray white type of thing. That is a very iconic piece of imagery. The ending on the beach, that in and of itself is incredibly iconic imagery that's been utilized and referenced in lots of fiction since then, especially in like the more kind of Cartoon Network, like slightly leaning on adult animation kind of stuff. All that kind of thing tends to reference this film quite a lot visually. The animation, the visuals, the art direction, absolutely fantastic in this film. There's a great action sequence involving Asuka and Unit 2 versus these like mass-produced Ava units. There's about 9 of them in total. The animation there is fantastic. There's, you know, lots of like debris flying off. There's a lot of movement in terms of, you know, fists flying everywhere, things being thrown. It's just really good, like Sakuga animation, fantastic stuff across the board. This is a gorgeous looking film that has that 90s look to it, that bit of film grain to it as well, which speaks to me because that is definitely my favorite era visually in terms of anime. And I think this film, more than any other piece of anime out there, really showcases the storytelling capabilities and opportunities of using anime and animation in general as a medium. What I mean by that is that this film has like the, you know, like Hollywood action blockbuster type stuff, but it also has a lot of like weird art house kind of imagery. I mean, there's like a live action segment in this film that is intentionally trying to comment upon like the fandom of Evangelion, and it's the kind of stuff where you wouldn't be able to do these weird art house type of things with, you know, these high stakes blockbuster type of action sequences in a live action film, in a Hollywood film. It just wouldn't happen because they wouldn't give the budget to something that is not going to like be as accessible as a typical blockbuster would. And I think this really showcases the opportunity that you have with animation, because whether you're doing big action sequences or whether you're just animating something that's visually really interesting, the budget's kind of gonna be pretty aligned. In an actual film, if you just have like a talking scene between people, a dialogue scene, it's gonna be like far cheaper than doing massive blockbuster action with like aliens and spaceships and all this kind of stuff. That is gonna be far more expensive. So utilizing anime as a medium, not only to do like some visually interesting and creative things, but from a storytelling perspective, tell some more like art house type of things, put some more art house ideas in there with the blockbuster action, the giant robots clashing against each other, blood and gore, massacres, things like that. You just wouldn't be able to get this in a live action film. So this film, I think in particular, really showcases what anime can do as a medium, not only for storytelling, but also for visually interesting stuff, entertainment. I think this has got everything. And speaking of action, there are some fantastic action sequences in this film, but also this film moves at a breakneck pace. From start to finish, there's never really a dull moment. Now, there's some smaller, slower moments in here meant to build character and meant to kind of dissect the mindset of a lot of these characters, particularly Shinji and Asuka, and sometimes a little bit of Rei as well. But yeah, like it moves so quickly because you essentially start out with Seal attacking Nerve. It's a cyber attack to start with, but then it turns into like full-on military attack, soldiers coming in. They essentially massacre Nerve, and you get a big action sequence, like I said, between Unit 2 and then all of these like mass-produced Ava types. And then you kind of go into the weird stuff, the end of the world type thing with Lilith, and all the visuals that you've come to expect from the end of Evangelion. Again, this film really never does slow down. There's never a dull moment. It moves at a pace, action to start with, but then it's just weird end of the world craziness that's going on. So there's never a dull moment in this film. I think it's about like an hour and 42 minutes. I can't remember exactly how long it is. But again, I was never bored watching this. I was always just completely locked in, particularly in that first half. Now, the second half is great, but the second half is definitely very weird. The first half is more like breakneck, high stakes action where no one's safe, and I love that kind of stuff. But again, I also love the back half of this film as well. Now, if there's one thing that the end of Evangelion is known for, it is basically depression. This film is looked at and everyone says it's the most hopeless, bleak, depressing example of storytelling that exists, where there's just no light at the end of the tunnel in it. So I went into this film thinking that. I went in going, this film is just going to leave me so empty by the end of it. And to a degree it does. But what I do really love about it is that through all the bleakness, through all the end of the world destruction and everyone dying and all this kind of stuff, it still ends on a bit of a hopeful note. There's an essence of us as humanity, us as individuals, we can do better. We can make a better world. Particularly with Shinji, it's I can make better decisions given the opportunity. I think that's quite beautiful. I think the fact that this film is so bleak and obviously represents a time in Anno's life where he was really at a low point in terms of depression, but there's still an element of hope there. It kind of ends on a note where there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is a world in which we can be better as humans. And again, I think that's really beautiful. I think that End of Evangelion is obviously representative of a time in Anno's life, as is every element of Evangelion, whether that's the original TV series, this film, or the rebuild films. They all kind of represent his mindset and like kind of where he is as a human, as an individual. And I think it's beautiful that even through all of the depression that he was evidently going through when making this, there's still that element of things can be better. There is hope there. And I really do love that. The last thing I want to end on in terms of positives is this. Much like Neon Genesis Evangelion, the original series, there is truly nothing like the end of Evangelion. It fully feels like a vision of someone, an individual, in this case being Hideaki Anno, but also that, yeah, you can look at this film and there's really nothing out there that exists that kind of has the same visuals, that has the same kind of pacing of story, same ideas. Well, there's films with the same ideas and such, but again, there's nothing like this as a complete package. It truly like stands the test of time as just being something so unique that feels very much in line with the original series, but also feels very detached from that in some ways because it does feel quite drastic going in terms of a certain direction. I really just appreciate this film and Evangelion in general, like everything this franchise has to offer, always delivers something that you don't really get from anything else. And I think all of the kind of different iterations of it do stand apart, whether that is the original series, this film, or the rebuild films, or the manga that exists out there, the anime light novel as well. All of it kind of evokes a slightly different experience where you could probably watch or read every single iteration of it, and you're always going to get something just a little bit different out of it. And also the fact that it's discussed and debated 28 years later proves that this thing has staying power and there's actual like tangible stuff there. There's things to latch onto, there's things to talk about, to dissect, and I love that kind of media that just exists where there's always going to be different interpretations of it. It's always just an exciting conversation to talk to someone and see, okay, what did you get out of this film? Now, there's plenty of films out there that do have that, but there's also a lot out there where there is like a set interpretation of it. And I don't think there's really too much out there that exists that is discussed all these years later pretty consistently Now though, let's dive into some of my negatives, which there is not many, I gotta be honest. The thing that I dislike the most about this is that there's a random pause that essentially splits this into an episode 25 and an episode 26, and it feels so unnecessary. Like, I get the purpose of it because you are essentially like remaking episode 25 and 26 of the original series, so in that regard, kind of makes sense. But from a storytelling perspective and the flow of the story, there was no reason to cut it where they do, because they cut it and then we have like a full credits, which are actually probably longer than the typical credits for an episode. So it just completely breaks the flow of story, and it does. It kind of sits in like a natural ending point for an episode. Like it doesn't just like stop. To a degree, it does, but I kind of get why they like cut it where they do. But at the same time, like it picks up right there again. So it's like there's no reason. You're essentially just breaking the flow of this story for no purpose whatsoever. And that really did irritate me. The other thing that I don't want to say is necessarily a negative, but there's some weird things that happen in this film. And I'm not just talking like the weird art house things. I'm talking some debatable decisions, some scenes. Like, for example, the opening scene. I had no idea that the particular scene that is the opening scene, which is the hospital scene, which I've heard about, I've seen, I'm fully aware of that scene. I did not know that the film opened with that. It's a strange way to open the film, and it's just a strange scene to put in there anyway. I guess it's sort of representative of something, but I think that along with the Misato kissing scene, I think there's better ways you could have represented the ideas that you were wanting to do without doing those things, because again, they're just a little bit weird, and you could say they're necessary for the story and necessary for Shinji as a character, and I would agree, but I think there are also different ways you could have done it where it's like, yeah, just different and maybe a little bit less weird. But overall, with this being my first watch of The End of Evangelion, it lived up to what I expected. Now, I don't think it was quite as bleak as some people do make it out to be, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I like that there's an element of hope still to it. I think it goes like far enough in a direction that works. Even, like a week after watching it, I'm still thinking about it. Like it's still kind of in my head all the time. And I think that's a great sign that yes, this film is exactly what people have said it is, where it does just stick with you. And I think those sometimes are the best kind of films where you just never really forget about them. The experience of watching it, especially for the first time, is just something that's never going to be replicated. And yeah, like there's a part of me that definitely wants to rewatch it, but at the same time, there's a part of me that just kind of wants to have that memory of only watching it once. And the fact that it's still there playing over in my head, I think is a very good sign that this film stands the test of time, but also is just like a fantastic piece of art. So with all that in mind, I'm going to give The End of Evangelion an A. But those were my thoughts on The End of Evangelion. Before I get out of here, please do leave a like on this video and subscribe if you are a fan of mecha anime content and want to see plenty more videos like this in the future. Also, like I said earlier, head on down to the comment section below. If you've seen The End of Evangelion, then let me know your thoughts on it. Where do you think it sits in terms of the endings? Do you prefer the ending of the original series, or do you prefer the ending of this film, or particularly this film, as an ending? Also, if you are a fan of Evangelion and you're interested in getting some model kits of Unit 1, Unit 2, and also Unit 0, particularly in the yellow colour, then head over to shop.yolopark.com. I'll leave my link down in the description below. Also use my coupon code MECHA, that's MECHA, for 5% off at checkout. You can get all three of those figures, or if you just want one of them, then go get those as well. Thank you once again for tuning into Mecha Chat today, and I'll see you guys next time.